I wanted to now go a little bit more to talk about how you got into filmmaking and what attracted you into filmmaking. Um, like, where did it all start? So you are obviously a writer director, but you also teach at university. So can you tell me a little bit the story of that?
Okay, the story, the origin story. As we're
Yes.
writers, we need to talk about it in writing terms. So my origin story. Um, so I was working in theatre. So theatre was always my passion, and you know, when I was at university, I did Spanish. This becomes important for the next bit, but I did loads of theatre that wasn't within my course, but it was to do with the student union and everything. And that's all I did. We went up to Edinburgh, and you know, I mean, I don't know, I can't remember studying that much, but I remember doing a lot of theatre, putting on plays. And then when I graduated, I wasn't, in those days, it wasn't like now where there's so many schemes for young and bright and, women, etc. In those days, it was really hard to get anywhere if you didn't come from Oxford or Cambridge. And if you were a woman, working class, then I was considered ethnic minority, then it was impossible. And so nothing happened, but I did an MA in dramaturgy at Central School of Speech and Drama. And I didn't even know what dramaturgy was, but I got onto it. I had my fees paid for me. I got money to help me do it. So who was I to ask? And I didn't realize, but it was to do with writing. It was to do with structure and story. But even though I was there, it was quite a very practice orientated MA. So I got to direct as well. So it was in different strands, and we were all like in some shed in King's Cross, left to our own devices to create work, and that was brilliant. But what happened there is I met David Glass from the David Glass Ensemble, and he employed me as a dramaturg on his work. So for 5 years, I worked in theatre. I worked structuring, devised work, and creating the scripts, the plays, if you like, that were, the actors were going to use based on the ideas that were coming out of the devised process. So I really had a baptism of fire in terms of story. And then a friend of mine, who's a lecturer in Hispanic studies down in Royal Holloway, had met this Mexican photographer on one of her trips and she was telling me about her. And I said, oh, she would make an amazing documentary. And she said, well, why don't you do it? I said, because I've never shot anything. I don't know how to make a film. She went, no, it'd be great. We'll go out there. We'll make. I was like, yeah, all right, let's do that. You're young, stupid, thinking it's all possible. And then suddenly she went, oh, I'm going in November. This was sort of like in September. I went, because so if you want to go for a recce, then maybe we can go together. And I went, oh, okay, let's do that. So I did a 1 weekend course with what then was the documentary filmmakers group. And I watched loads of documentaries and watched, like literally immersed myself in understanding what documentary was. And then I did a 1 weekend course of a self-shooter, how to shoot by yourself. And I borrowed a camera from the theatre company, and I went out to Mexico. And I thought, well, I'll just practice shooting. Little did I know that actually we were making the film. So I thought we were going to go out for recce, but had amazing things happen that meant that I had material for the film. But what I realized was that my training in story and was fundamental to know where to point the camera. So I was constantly engaged with what's happening here, where's the story, what's the story, where's it evolving. So I was constantly working on it. So we had 3 weeks that was so intense, and it was a road trip through the jungle in Mexico, looking at the 10 years since the uprising. And I came back with like 90 hours of footage and going, what do I do with this? And I started to investigate, and I found out about European Documentary Network, and they were doing a pitching session, a doc lab, they called it, down in Lisbon, and you had to apply with your project. So I thought, okay. And I remember I hadn't edited anything before, and it was in the old days where you had books, So I had this big, like, how to use Final Cut book. I had 24 hours to cut together a trailer of this footage. And I cut together 3 minutes, sent that off, applied, and got on to this lab, which was phenomenal. I mean, it was suddenly you're working with these amazing people in the industry about your project, so you're constantly working, and at the end of it, you have to pitch it, and you pitch it to a room from different commission editors, etc. So again, it was a real baptism fire, and there I met an amazing editor, Danish editor, who said, look, you've got amazing material here, you just need to work with a good editor. So I went, okay, so that's what I did. I came back and put out a call on Shooting People, and Gagik Garagosian got in touch with me. And I thought, I like his name, he's Armenian, sounds interesting. So I contacted Gagik, and we ended up working on this documentary together. And he had his studio at the time in Ealing, and I was going there every day, and we were editing it and telling the story through this. So I got a real buzz in telling the story through the lens, through the camera, and that really just kind of, I was smitten by it. And so from there, I then did a short film, Backroads. Again, I was looking for a script. I wasn't writing at the time. So I found a script by Rupert Raby called Backroads. He was putting it out on Shooting People. And I contacted him, and we met up, and, we were we were on the same page with the ideas. And we got, and then I was also at that time working at DFG, Documentary Filmmakers Group, which happened as a result of making my own documentary. And then that led me to meet Lucy Baxter, who was then the producer on that. So these things, just by, in a way, just going for it, not waiting for anyone to give you permission. The circumstances are never going to be perfect for you to go and make your film. You're never going to have the money, the right time. You just got to take it and see what happens. And the worst that can happen is nothing happens, but you learn. You'll always have something if you're shooting. So it might not be the thing that you're planning, but it might be something else. It will lead you somewhere else. You've got to keep moving. So I think now it's a lot easier because, our phones, our iPads have these amazing cameras. So especially with documentary, it just opens up so many possibilities. The important thing always is the story. What's the story inside the film?
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you, because I really like the way you said, what I picked up on was first that you learned the art of storytelling through theater, and also when you went to do that documentary in Mexico, you knew where the story was, where to point the camera at. Can you expand a little bit on that? Like if I've got a camera and I know more or less what I'm about to film, like what am I looking for exactly?
So when you're looking through your viewfinder or your screen, what is it saying to you? What's that one sentence? Every shot is a sentence. And one of the things that I tell my students on documentaries, go, have that running commentary in your head. So John is sitting down, he wants to eat the dinner, but then the doorbell run, so if you have the story running in your head, you know where to point this camera. So I was doing that instinctively, in that I was looking at everything through the camera. I wasn't at this point knowing whether it was going to make the film or not make the film. In a way, that was completely irrelevant. I didn't even know if there was going to be a film at that point. I didn't care, but I was interested in shooting. So there was a scene in the film where I was shooting Araceli, God rest her soul. She died actually not a few years after that. But I was making sure that I was filming her, whatever she did. So I thought, right, I'm just going to film her. And then I realized she's the story. So I'll just follow her. Wherever she goes, I'll be with her. And we were in this wonderful cafe called Bar Opera in Mexico City. And it was one of the end of the day in her studios. And I'm still filming. I'm filming her. She was an amazing storyteller. And suddenly, this woman, it was around the Day of the Dead, a very famous actress in Mexico, Ophelia Medina, turns up dressed as a sort of skeleton holding an urn with this troupe behind her singing, and it was a dead actor that his wish was that he gets paraded through this cafe where he spent most of his days. So Araceli, knowing the story, and I'm filming Araceli, so I am with Araceli going, oh my God, this is so-and-so. So I'm following her. I know that the story is her. At no point do I lose that link. So wherever she thinks is interesting has to be part of my film. And so I knew that the only way I could focus it was focusing on her. Otherwise, the whole world becomes quite too much. Where's the story? You know, I'm in a room, so what am I going to focus on? And you have to know what the story is you want to say, and recognize that in this room. So if you're in a, you know, a very dull setting, like I say, a classroom, you know, you have to think, whose story is this? Is it the teacher's? Is it the student? Which student story is it? What am I saying with this sequence, with this shot? You know, is it about the content, or is it about the reception of the content? And you've only got one camera, so you have to make a decision and stick to it, because otherwise that's when you get this thing going on. People just go, oh, I'm filming, oh no, that's more interesting, oh shit, oh, maybe it's up here, maybe it's down there. So it's having that instinct to know, okay, this is where it's happening. Yeah. And if you don't have that instinct, you can cultivate it by just going, just say the sentence. And if you say the sentence in your head, you've got the shot, then you can move, and at least you'll have something to edit.
Obviously, this is one of the skills that you need to develop as a filmmaker, especially as a director. What would you say are other skills that you need to develop as a director?
Okay, so I think understanding story is very important, but then breaking that down is, so how are you telling that story? You're telling that story through the characters, the act's performance. So you need to know how to direct actors and how actors work, and actually understanding what their craft is in that process. And I think if you've not worked with actors as a director, go and do an actors workshop, you know, because it's very hard, I think. I mean, I can't imagine. I've always been working with actors, so it's hard to imagine. But if you don't know what they're capable of, you don't know then how this script can then be elevated. What is the actor bringing to it? What does the actor need to know from you in order for them to bring to the table what you're looking for to tell the story? So you need to understand how beats in the story work. So everything, like when you're filming, I think a lot of the time it's really interesting. So I look at a lot of students' work, and they'll be filming something, and you go, but do you have the reaction shot? And I know we didn't think we needed it. I'm like, okay. So we haven't got anything to cut to, because what we don't have now is that next beat. So you're editing, when you edit, you know yourself, because you've edited stuff, is that you're editing along a series of beats, you know, the beat where this person feels this, and that person has an action and reaction to tell the story. And so you need to know that, because if you don't have it, it'll be on the cutting room floor, the virtual floor of your cutting room, because you cannot keep it, because it's not saying it. In fact, it'll be saying something that will move us away from the story, unless it has, you know, an intrinsic aesthetic, you know, anthropological interest in its own right. If it doesn't serve the story, doesn't propel the characters forward, it gets lost. So you need to then go back and go, I need to know how this is going to cut together. So as a director, I think you need to understand editing and what that process is in order to facilitate you in directing, because you need to be looking at this and going, how is this scene going to act? It's not just about a series of really interesting shots, because these interesting shots, if they're not saying anything, nothing happens. So editing, you don't have to be proficient at editing, but just know what the other end of it is. And also writing, because writing again is a series of beats. Knowing how to read a script rather than necessarily writing it. Knowing that, you know, if you've got 2 pages of dialogue, right? If that dialogue isn't transformative in terms of the characters, in terms of the story, what have you got is a ping pong thing. I mean, it's going to be cut. It's going to be dull. It's going to drain. You know, we know when we're watching something, like, this isn't moving, so it'll get cut. So you need to know what everything is serving. So those are crafts, I think, that you can absolutely learn. None of this is about talent. This is just doing your homework. And there are so many books and so many things on YouTube that you can read to understand that. And when you understand that, then you know how to block the scene. And by blocking, I mean, you know, placing the people, the actors and the objects in that space and where the camera goes. Understanding the camera as, you know, another, if you like, writing tool, because the camera is telling us the story. So wherever you're going to place the camera is going to speak to us. You know, it's going to tell us what's important and what isn't important in that frame. So you've got to know what performance the camera's doing as well, and what that is adding to it.
As a case study, I'm not sure, I don't know whether you've watched it or not, but so you just mentioned that you watched my film, my first film that I kind of like decided to put out there. It wasn't really my first film, Blind Date. In terms of what we were just discussing, what do you think was lacking? Or because I love it every time someone sees it, the first thing that they say is, oh wow, it looked great. And I know that meant the story wasn't that great, but it did look great. What do you think?
So you had great performers, you had great location, and it looked great. I think very early on, you get a sense of where this is going. So you know it's going to, you know what the twist is.
So it was predictable.
It was predictable. I would say it was too long for the idea. So it's like 13 minutes, 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting thing, because it's to do with, does your story warrant the length? Now, with something like this, because it's comic and it just has a simple flip, is I would have made it half that length. You know, it would have had less time for us to be, you know, by the time we know what's going to happen, you then lose our interest, because then we're just getting to the end. But I think there could have been a double twist to it.
Yeah,
and that's one way of getting out of a predictable twist, is to find another one, and especially because of that. And you know, it's just tightening it, I think. But it was great. I thought it was brilliantly shot. It was entertaining. It was a great idea.
So it could have been shorter. I actually thought about it, and to be honest, when I was editing it, I really didn't know how to cut it down. I already had someone telling me that it was long, but I didn't know how to cut it down because I was attached to every single thing in that film. I think as a good exercise might be interesting to find another editor and just give him the footage, because I still have the footage. It would be interesting to see whether it could be cut in a different way with someone who's got a different style. I don't know if I'll ever do it. Maybe if I get, I don't know, a student editor who wants to, you know, play with it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because it wasn't written. It wasn't written as a 6-7 minute. So that's something where I think the idea that sometimes we can fix things in the edit is, it's kind of it's a misdirection. We really need to make sure that the scripts that go to be shot are ready. Like, if it's not in the script, it doesn't get shot. But also, if it's in the script and it does get shot, sometimes it's hard to cut around it because you've written it. So, you know, your setups and payoffs are happening in a certain way. And if you start chopping through that, you're losing some of the time that you, within that scope, you've allowed to happen. So that would be you know, and I think with everything that we make, it's an amazing achievement. We make it, and everything is a learning exercise. Is to then go, okay, this should have been brought up right at the script level.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's, I don't know, have you had the chance to see the other one that I made, Introspect?
No.
No, okay. I would like to use them maybe. Maybe we could do another interview another day, just as a case study, because just what you've said now, it was very. I think it's maybe very interesting for a lot of people, because I always thought about this thing that if you don't put it in the script, it's really difficult to get shot. But the reverse that you just said, it sounded to me very true, because that's exactly how I felt. That's why I couldn't cut it down, because that's exactly how I wrote it. And having said that, you know, I haven't done any training in writing. So all the stuff that I filmed, I also wrote just because I didn't know any other writers. And I wanted to get things done. And if I don't stop, in the sense that if I want to make something, if I don't find someone who's better at me than that, I'll just do it myself.
Absolutely, because otherwise that film would not have been made. But
Exactly.
I would say that this is where it's really important that one puts their work out for feedback. So there are loads of, you know, writing groups on Facebook, and it's quite a lovely sort of supportive community. And quite often, you know, I see people do it and they say, look, I've got this script, can someone read it for me and give me some notes? And people say yes. Can anyone recommend someone who's, you know, and it's all done free, and I've done things for people. And so if you don't have people within your own circle that can do that, that stuff is out there. And that is always good, because the opportunity to even have the discussion about your work with someone who has no invested interest in it, other than just helping you tell your story, is that you will come to that conclusion. Because, or you know, you might go, I don't know, I really want that to happen. I need it to be this long. You know, we had a situation with Losing Grace where our line producer was going, well, no, I don't think you need all this sequencing of, you know, I think you just need one exterior. And I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm not going to have this fight right now. So I was, you know, fighting on other levels. And, oh, you don't need this scene and you don't need that scene. And we turned up on set, and Bear and I were like, we're gonna squeeze that scene in now. So we sort of set it up. Actually, it's all ready to go. So after we've shot this, we're going to go upstairs because we've got the tracks ready. And, you know, we were finding ways of putting that stuff back, because the decisions made to cut it were about time, not about story, not about feeling, not about tempo, not about pace. So, and quite often I think a lot of scripts go into production that aren't ready yet, when we do them on our own. However, when you do get onto a development program, let's say like the BFI or whatever, one thing that happens is that your script goes through the paces. So even though we didn't get selected for the money from Film London BFI with Daughter, we were lucky enough to go through their development scheme, and that absolutely transformed a script that I thought at the time was kind of ready. We knew there was tweaks and things like that we could have done, but you know, it really got us to go deep and explore and ask the questions, but why? And then when Babby came on board the project as well, again, loads of notes came through. So now the script that we have is so watertight, but it wasn't a year ago, because it was that development process. So the first thing that you write, the feeling is there, the where you want to go with this. So with say Blind Date, I just think you were a couple of discussions away from going, okay, so at what point, you know, why does he, you know, what is he afraid of in the real one that he gets himself fantasizing that the perfect blind date? So you can then, by just asking that question, you then as the writer go back and go, okay, what can I sort of foreshadow a little bit at the beginning? You know, so these things are nothing is ever random. Even the fish, is not random. You know, everything that you put in there is speaking about the world and that thing. So it's that thing of going, okay, let's go back. You know, who is he really? What is he really afraid of? It could be that when you then turn the camera back on him, he didn't look so sexy. That would be the double twist. That in fact, it was someone who was the complete visual opposite of your main character. So not only had he imagined this beautiful woman turning up for a blind date, is that he imagined himself being someone else. You know, so that would have then kind of gone in terms of, apart from it being a gimmicky thing at the end, it's also part of who he is, of going, he's imagined this scenario. The whole thing could have been then in a different place. It could have been in a dirty cafe, you know, on the old Kent Road. And, so all those things about us, about our human condition, about, you know, how we see ourselves, how we want others to see us, and who we really are. And then, are we really, you know, that is such a changing thing. So I think going back to what you were saying, what other things does a director need? I think a director needs to be reading stuff around psychology. They need to be reading things around, you know, aesthetics, and be up on, you know, all sorts of things. The list is endless. Philosophy and all the sorts of things, not just reading about craft, but understanding human nature, because those deep down in everything, whether it's a sci-fi, comedy, you know, whatever, you've got to have that authentic truth about human nature, because that is what your audience is going to connect to. And go, oh yeah, I will have days when, you know, we all have days when we feel like we're trolls, you know.
Yeah, and you know what you just said really resonated with me, because I always struggled to, in a way, connect to the kind of filmmaking that is very popular, especially in the UK, and I would say around the world at the moment, that is kind of like the realism. I don't connect very much to that, but what I really like is that kind of like magic of films. Is, you know, I really like the Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson style, where you have that kind of like absurd, fantastic reality, but then inside that fantastic reality, it really speaks to you from a human point of view. So there are those truths that you say about human nature, and I think that's the kind of like the direction that I want to take with my films. I kind of struggled with it for some time, and I had another lecturer that I talked to, that I edited her documentary film Stunts at 15. I think I linked it to you as well. Sue Clayton from Goldsmiths, and she actually gave me a huge hand. She said, well, you don't have to do realist films just because everyone else does. You have to find your own voice. And then she watched my films and she told me exactly what my strong points are. She was like, you have to work obviously on this, and this, and this, and this. But you know, this is great, this is great, this is great, this is great. Just use those elements. This is your voice. Why are you telling me that you don't have a style?
I think you touched on something really important, and that is finding one's voice. And that takes time. You know, it took me years to find that, and I was like you, stuck in that space of going, I somehow I need to be making the films that people are expecting to see, not because I want to make them or because I care about them. So I felt like I couldn't be me because no one's interested in me, but I need to be presenting myself in the way I understood the world to want to receive me. And so you get stuck in this sort of things that you don't feel connected to. I mean, I've got, you know, some of my films definitely are in that bag. And then suddenly you find your voice and you go, well, actually, no. Like with Losing Grace, the idea of having a musician in the set, in what would have looked like a very realist, it's a very realist, you know, style in some respects, but what I was trying to do was a kind of poetic realism, because I love films that go into the world of magic possibility. Doesn't, I don't want to see kitchen sink dramas. I don't find them interesting very much. I like quirky, I like something that slightly sits oddly. So even with Polly, which is about, prostitution and all of that, we're not creating a film that is like a very dark, slit your wrists episode in EastEnders. And it can quite easily go in that. But I think 10 years ago, very much so, would have felt like I could only do that. But yeah, and I think short films are a wonderful platform to experiment with that stuff, and if you have an idea that makes you go like that, then that's a sign that you're on track to your voice and owning it. I think one of the things that I've learned along the years is that you have to own your work, good, bad, and different. And the moment you own it and find the narrative through it for yourself, what is this? Like you are doing with Blind Date just now. What that does is it puts you on track to your voice. It is quite often I see people that make early, especially emerging filmmakers. You're making work, and it's not great, it's okay, it's fine. You feel a bit icky about it, you hide it, and then you make the next one. It's not, it's not brilliant, so you hide it. And actually, these films are so important in the film, in your journey to become the person, the filmmaker that you will become, and that takes time. It's own the whole journey, and no one is judging. No one's going, oh my God, look what, there isn't that. Because everyone in making films knows what a massive achievement it is to even make anything, from beginning to end. It takes so much resolve. So the fact that anyone does anything from the beginning is well done. And now you're just on a journey. We're just all on a journey, and it's evolving. And bring in the magic, bring in whatever, it work, doesn't work, who cares? It will take you to the next step.
Yeah, it's tricky because on the one hand, obviously, as you said, you need patience and a lot of practice. But on the other hand, it's, you have to make a living. It's also very important. For me, it was like I knew that I had to find a way of, of working professionally within the industry before I started doing my work. So I went in that direction. I still kept thinking and making my films, but I had to develop myself from a professional point of view first, so that I wasn't stressed. So yeah. I wasn't, every day stressed and had that kind of like deadline. I've got only 2 years or 3 years, and if I don't make the best film that goes to Cannes in this year or 2 years,
I failed.
I failed, exactly. And if you go with that mentality, you will fail because you've got that stress.
But also, it's not that you'll fail, it's that you've created the rules that you've set out are the ones that have a time frame for you to pass or fail. And so according to those rules, yes, you fail. In reality, we all know, like, I got this job, like, so my series of jobs were, one of the, I did an MA, I got on, there was a resident company, and I got on with him, he offered me a job. The first year, I wasn't paid. So I thought, what job can I do that can still allow me to do this theatre job that I'm loving? And I got a reception job in the city that worked part-time in the mornings and, got me money to stay there. Then they still weren't paying. I said, you know what, if you don't pay me, I'm going to leave, because I started realizing I had value now. They were, no, actually, don't leave, we'll pay you. So I then started getting a salary, which enabled me to continue working. But because I went out and did this documentary in Mexico, which I borrowed money. I took a loan out. I don't recommend people do this, but I took out a loan and went to Mexico to make this film. But actually that film's paid off, in the sense that had I not made that film, I wouldn't have applied for the job at Documentary Filmmakers Group. Had I not got that job, I don't think I would have got the job at Queen Mary. So it was like, life is a series of, like in any story, a series of beats. And actually, if you keep moving in what you want to do, opportunities will come about. you know, and you have to have a very yes attitude to it. I think, you know, like this whole thing, right? You asked me, you know, do you want to do it? And I'm thinking, yeah, I say yes to, like with Liz, I went, yeah. I don't actually always think what's the end result, but actually the end result to a lot of these things is like 5-6 years down the line, because one of the most important things has been relationships, surrounding, building that community around you of people who are like-minded values, in terms of values, okay, that you're growing with. I mean, like with Lynn's a really interesting one. So Lynn's an actress, again, phenomenal in terms of wanting to do stuff. So she got stuck with not having enough things, and she was working with a group of actors doing the Miser technique, and they said, let's do a film. And she goes, oh, I know a writer. And at that time I hadn't really written anything, and I don't know why she thought I could write this. So she said, can you write something for us four to do? And I was like, oh, not really. I was really lacking in confidence. I really didn't. But I thought, you know what? I like the energy of this, which was, let's make something in 6 weeks from idea to delivery, right? 6 weeks, let's make a short film. I went, okay. So I wrote a script based on these four people I didn't know, that they can be in one location. Right, it's got to be one location. There's four characters. What can the situation be? We came up with all these stories. Anyway, so I wrote the script, and the film wasn't very good. I mean, I didn't direct it. Not that I'm going to take that away. The director was fine. The script was very good. It was, you know, it's not even out there because it's not that good. But I met Babby, who, you know, is an amazing DP and an amazing person. So flash forward 5 years, and he's created the opportunity for us to make Daughter, where Lynn's now the actor for. So what I'm saying is that you have to have faith in yourself and in this journey, and go, you don't know where things will, you know, unfold and reveal themselves. Liz as well. Again, I said yes, and I didn't know what yes to was. I didn't think that, you know, within like 18 months we would have shot a film called Losing Grace. But what I always valued was the relationship. I love people who have that openness to their own work, to creating opportunities. Like, you know, you're doing this podcast, that you're doing it thinking about other people, and that's what I love about it. It's not, you know, it's purely going, actually, what can we do? Where can we do this to create, you know, learning environments and space and stuff like that? You know, Babby opened up a free film school last summer. And, you know, I went along to that and helped, and I did some of the story development. And Fatima Mehdi was there, who won quite a lot of awards with her film Bitter Sea, which was a BFI funded film. Who's a friend of hers. I got to meet her. Suddenly meeting people by being there, by creating space, opportunity, saying yes, I think is the most important thing that we can do as artists. If we're only thinking, but is this going to win me the Oscar? I'm not sure. I'm not going to do it then. You've just closed all these doors that who knows where they go.
The way I approach it is, I commit to this industry because I love doing this. So there has to be that kind of emotion. You know, a lot of people love doing different things. In this case, I know that I love doing this, and I commit to it. And I think if you commit to it, you just go forward whether you win or lose every single battle. But in terms of failure, I would say you fail only if you give up.
Absolutely. And you don't know where, you know, you might not be, you know, you might have an idea, think I'm going to be a writer director, but actually your path takes you and you become DP, you know, or you become a producer. It doesn't in a way matter where it goes. You know, if someone said to me, you know, where are we now in 2020? If someone said to me 20 years ago, right, that you will be making films, you'll be teaching film, and you will have made award-winning films, and you will be doing, I'd be like, what? I can't even see where those dots are, let alone that that's going to be where I'm going to end up. It was like if you said go to the moon, I'd go, okay, I can see that happening. I know there's I can go and apply and to do this thing, but I didn't know what the journey was to become a filmmaker. I would have just gone, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. So I couldn't, no way, plot this journey. But the one thing that's been consistent in it has been my drive to committed to the journey and committed to the working with people who I like working with, creativity, opportunities, meeting people, love all of that. That's been a constant. And actually with every single one of those things, it has unfolded and made, things happen, but and they lead to other things, and you will find ways to make money, which is what you said. We've got to find a way of living. We're not going to live by making short films, but you've got to create an environment that works for you, that gives you what you need and space to actually make the work as well. Quite often I hear, yeah, but I don't, I can't, yeah, but. And actually, if all you have is a Sunday, but you're committed, you'll be making stuff. If only what you have is 2 hours in the day, you will find those 2 hours to write. So there are never any excuses, and there's never going to be the right environment. And it's a bit like people who want to have children. Yeah, but I haven't got a house. If we all thought like that, we'd never have families. There's never going to be the perfect syndrome where you go, right, you've got no other concerns. I'm going to pay you £50,000 a year so you can make work. In fact, I'm going to give you millions to make your work. I'm going to give you money to write your work. And you don't have to worry about anything else. That is nobody's reality.
It's not going to happen.
Anybody who makes it, and you ask them what's been their journey, well, it's been tough. It's been, sometimes you have those choices. Like, I work, so when do I write? Well, I have to get up at 4 if I want to write. I have to go to bed at 2. I have to find that space. It isn't going to be, well, take time out so you can write. You steal time. You constantly, I create deadlines for myself for my work, because without that, I know I'm not going to move anywhere. And that's why we need that commitment.
And that's why you can't do this job for the money. Because you need that extra energy that has to come from your passion towards it. So you need to commit, and you need to create your community, and just keep going, and it will be at the least it will be very, very, very interesting and fun.
I mean, what will be interesting is 10 years time, where are you and I going to be?
Yeah.
We're going to be somewhere. We're still alive. We'll be somewhere. Where would those? Because you can't tell. Everything happens. I can't remember if I read it somewhere, or one of those things where you go, well, actually, life turns on a series of little decisions. It's not the big decisions. It's the little decision that went, oh, I'm going to write this. I'll give you an example. So, for example, Xenos, which is the script that's now ready for pre-production. That started, I was on the tube and I went, I really need to find an idea that I can write that is around women. I want to write something new, because I was working on another feature film with a friend, and nothing happened with it. So I've got to find something I've got to write on my own. And an idea came, which was, what about if I did a kind of female King Lear? And I literally wrote it on the back of an envelope. I didn't even have a notebook in my back. Rubbish for a writer. Always carry a notebook and a pen. Anyway, I had an envelope and I found a pencil. So I wrote it on this envelope. And then, I'm listed on, joined every group to do with filmmaking. Do that. That's the first thing. And one thing popped up, which was called Modern Tales. And they were looking for ideas in development to go on this development scheme for 6 months, I think it was. And I think we met every 2 weeks. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to take this back of the envelope and write 1 page on this, and I will just to submit it, just because then I know I've taken it 1 step further. And you had to apply with a producer. I didn't have a producer at the time. But I asked Lynn, because Lynn says yes to everything. I said, can you just come along and be my producer on this? She went, yeah, well, actually, I was thinking of doing some producing. So I said, well, won't lie. We'll be honest, but I can't even apply without it. So I had developed this one page thing, and I'm going back to voice. I thought, who cares about where I'm from? I'm going to set it in India because people like people from India and stories about India. So I'll set it about India and tell this story about India. So I got it through one page. We got selected for an interview, so we turned up. Now, kind of, I knew there was a story here, and I was committed to. And Lynn was, really open about her experience and skills, and she'd produced this short film we did, and we had a good relationship. Anyway, we got selected onto this scheme. But on this scheme now, I've got this one-page idea that is pretty flimsy at the best of things. But each 2 weeks we had homework, so you had to drive this thing through, and one was looking at the characters, one was looking at this, one was looking at this, and each week you were presenting in this group of another 10 projects the development of your project. And it was in this whole scheme, which was suddenly in the middle of it, I realized, what the hell am I writing about India for? I'm not Indian. I have to tell the story. My story was in this, but I was afraid that wasn't what people wanted. And there was a real moment, literally, it was like, I felt like someone slapped me on the face and said, you have to make this about Cyprus. And I went, oh God, yeah, I do. And I've been running away from my own parts. And then I went, so I presented the homework, and I went, but actually, I've had a rethink, and it's this. And I sort of went into pitching this new thing, and the room was silent. I thought, oh shit, kick me off now, because I haven't done the homework properly. And they just went, about time. Because my voice was suddenly coming through. But had I not said yes, and I spoke to someone else who saw that advert, and they went, oh yeah, I was going to apply to that, but I didn't because they wanted money for it. And I went, oh, I hadn't even noticed. But in fact, yes, there was originally a fee, but they managed to get funding, so no one paid to be on this scheme. So, if you're not saying yes and you're not putting stuff out, but had I not gone for it, I would have lost the envelope with the idea on it. Nothing would have happened to it. And yet that story, I then submitted it to Sundance. It got shortlisted. I submitted it again to Sundance. It got shortlisted. Each time it developed. And then I sent it to Torino, and it got accepted. And I went to the development scheme there and transformed it. I mean, it was like the biggest break in my career. Suddenly, I knew I had something that was very strong and powerful.
So would you say that was your break? Because it's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you.
I think that's a really interesting question, isn't there? Because there's an external and an internal answer to this. So I could say my break happened when I won Best Documentary at the Rome International Film Festival back in 2005, 6, whenever it was. But I wasn't ready to know what that meant or how I can use that to move forward. So nothing happened. I could say that I had a break when, I think we raised something like £35,000 in 2007 or 8, where it was to make the back roads. And it got selected by British Council, but kind of, again, I didn't have the confidence and thing to believe in it. My break, yes, from my personal thing, I think was the beginning of people saying yes and me believing that you know what, this is my stuff. I own it. And that was getting onto Filmonomics, which I got on, and I realizing how lack of self-belief I had. Oh my God, it was almost like a real issue around believing myself to have the right to do this, but recognizing that took me on the journey to go, oh my God, you got to sort that shit out. Your confidence your esteem has to come up. And so that was the beginning really of the gene. So Torino, I would say, yeah, but also because by then I had got belief totally. Now, do not wait for anyone to give you permission to say yes to you to make your work. Just grab it, do it. Fuck what anyone else thinks. You know, if they don't like it, tough shit, just keep going. Doesn't matter. Don't stop needing that validation from everyone else. You know, it was enough that I knew what I was doing, and if it was good, bad, in a way, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you're doing it and that you're open and learning. So I had got to that place as a person. So when I got to Torino, I was able to really, you know, own it and love just being there and having like 5 days to just completely go deep into this story. I had nothing to prove, you know. I didn't care. I was just like a kid in a sweet shop, you know, having that time with some of the most amazing story people in Europe, and then pitching it to a very, you know, safe environment, because it was all about development and story, and having and just knowing my story, coming away from that and going, right, I have the script, and getting the feedback from my mentor that went, no, your script's ready, go for it. I was like, that was a moment I thought, no, actually, you know. So going back to what's your break, I think we make our opportunities. Till you get to the point where someone says to you, here's the money, go make your film. That external thing is really only half the story. I think the rest of it is that you will create opportunity. You will decide at some point this matters to you and you're committed. You're going to put in the graft. You know, graft is so fundamental. So with Losing Grace, yeah, we didn't get any state money. We didn't get any funding that really made a difference, you know, that meant that we were fully funded to do it. We had to put money up for it. But actually, do you know what? We believed in what we were doing. So it wasn't about the money, but we knew that actually this project was worth it. And we took the opportunity. We took it. We didn't wait for permission. And I think that's the key, I think. So yes, breaks can happen, like the little yeses, and the yeses keep you going. You know, you have about 100 no's, and then you get one little yes. You go, oh, okay, that means that this is moving forward. But you put in, you have to do the 99 no's to get that one yes. And if you don't do them, you're not going to get the breaks. So you make those breaks happen
by getting out there and making things and creating those relationships, meeting people. Yeah. Is there a quote that you'd say you live your life by?
I think for me, it's just do what you can. Always do what you can with what you've got. So it's not what don't I have? Okay, because like I said, I'm never going to have. Right now, I can talk about, I can go and make a film now, but I can go, oh, do you know what? I haven't got access to a camera and I haven't got any money. I haven't got any time. I'm stuck indoors. Can't do anything really. But I go, well, what do I have? Well, I've got me. I've got an iPad, I've got a phone, and I can shoot something if I want to. So working with what we have and not working with not finding the reasons not to do something, but looking at what you have in any given time and doing the best you can in that time, and don't be precious about it. You know, do it, move on. You know, celebrate it as an act of creativity. It happened. Next, like you were saying, I mean, it is so fundamental, and just not allowing the no's to be any reflection about, it's not rejection of you, just that thing wasn't right at that time. If you believe in it, carry on. You know, don't let anyone else tell you anything different. I don't know, that was a saying, that was a thing that I go by, but I don't take no for an answer. I think that's my thing.
It's so funny because your quote is exactly the same as mine. It's exactly the same. And in the interview with Bea, when I asked her the question, so I gave her that example, do the best that you can with what you have. That's kind of like what I repeat myself constantly, and keep going. It's really funny because it's exactly the same approach as you have.
Well, do you know what? I wonder how many people who are doing it have that same approach. Because I know people who want to do it and are not doing it, and have the opposite. That, you know, you will talk to them and they'll go, yeah, but you don't understand. I've got this. It's all right for you. I've got this. I've got. I'm thinking, oh, you're never gonna have a perfect situation.
It's also a personality thing where what do you look at? Do you look at the glass that is half empty or half full? Because obviously, you know, you can look at your life and say, and straight away see what you don't have, or you can look at your life and see straight away what you do have in order to make that thing happen, or something in order to make something happen. So it's a lot, I think, about personality, and
It
think
is about person. Yeah.
I think we are both doers. Like I'm definitely, I know people tell me that I'm a doer.
Yeah, exactly. And you go
Yeah.
above and beyond whatever that is. It's like, you know, I think people who are doers will go, right, okay, so I'm committed to this. You know, like for example, with losing Grace, I'm committed to this. I'm going to cook. You know, that means I have to get up early. It means I have to spend time planning what the meals are going to be for 5 days for 30 people. I'll do that. You know, and there was a moment where I thought, oh my God, I think I've taken on too much, and that I'm beginning to sort of hyperventilate. But it was about just going, this has to happen, and no sleep, that's okay.
Yeah, and especially if you like cooking and you know that you're good at it, it's like, of course I'll do it. And it's, again, really funny. On my second film, Introspect, I cooked the dinner. You know, I like cooked the dinner for everyone. It's like, no, I'll make pasta. Like, don't worry about it. I want to eat properly. I've got exactly the same approach as you in that respect.
And what happened as a result of that on that set? You know, when people eat well, what happens to?
Well, what happened is we ate really late, but then some of us, we kind of like stayed in the house. So we spent the next 2-3 hours going through the rushes and thinking and having other ideas, etc., etc. And then we had another day of shoot the next day. It created a really good atmosphere that then gave you energy. So even if we didn't sleep a lot, the next day we were really focused and excited and had that energy that we needed in order to finish the job. So creating a really good atmosphere on the set, I think, is very, very important. And it comes to what you said about how you treat people.
Food is very important in the way we communicate in our culture. So I'm Greek, and you know, sitting around the table to eating is normal. You know, you don't sit and eat independently. This notion of like everyone helps them, you know, that's like so alien to me. But it's interesting. But when you sit around a table, and like we were sitting around the table for breakfast, which I'd prepared, and then we would sit around the table for lunch, and we would sit around the table for dinner. We created this company that was like watertight. It meant that we could, this film was in all our blood. It wasn't, everyone was talking story. No one was looking at their watch. No one was, you know, everyone was looking forward to just, we were all working together. And that's what happens when we sit and eat together. You know, I mean, it's interesting. I think Coppola did the same with The Godfather. They always ate together. And I don't think it's a kind of accident, but I think if you really want to create a company feeling, food is the way forward. You know, don't do that, you do it at your peril. You've just then got a bunch of independent people working on something. You've got to work harder as a director to get them engaged in your vision, whereas actually if you all sit and eat together and you put nice food on the table, and you know, in the evening we had nice wine, everyone was like, oh my God, you know.
Yeah, I would also say, you know, yes, work harder, but also work smarter. So if I want to pursue my career as a writer-director, what are some of the online spaces that, in your opinion, I absolutely need to check out?
Okay, so all of them have Facebook pages that you need to absolutely join. So there will be things like, if you're a writer, there are Bang to Rights. There's and if you look at one of those, you'll find all the other ones that are connected to it. There's the Writer's Space. There's a one that I find that is really useful is Go Into the Story with Scott Myers. That's brilliant, and the people who share that again are really good. Following London Writers Blog, I mean, it says London, but it's not London centric. It's quite international. London Writers Blog put out, I think every week, a list of deadlines for writing, and they can be paid gigs, free gigs, from theatre through to film. And it's a great way of sort of building up a kind of deadlines for things. Following Sundance, they put out things. Following Film London, if you live in London, or the equivalent of wherever you live in the country, because especially for Twitter, I find Twitter being the most important place for getting up to date deadlines and information that is happening, competitions. People put out a call for, you know, a short film, and you've got to write a script, you've got a deadline, etc. I think there's one at the moment with Unlimited Kingdom. They've got a competition on. I think wherever that information comes, Twitter comes from. Facebook is really good for you then to advertise what you need, whether that's a question about script or whether that's a question about getting crew. So production base, London, there's a production crew, production crew. If you just if you just go into Facebook and start searching all of them, just join every single group. And then you'll start seeing which ones you're more drawn to and that you use more as well. But production base is a really good one for jobs, especially first entry jobs and paid gigs, because that's another way that one might, you know, create an environment where they can sort of work on their stuff. At the moment, there's no jobs, but we are going to come out of this pandemic at some point. Get ready.
Yeah, exactly. Use this time. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what you have. You've got time now.
Got amazing time for solidifying things, developing things, you know. I know there's a sense of, like, you know, this sense of hyper productivity, that one should be, you know, hyper productive in this, and it is also very strange anxiety generating time as well. And be kind to yourself, but by all means don't let this stop you in just writing out ideas and preparing.
Yeah, but also, as you said, is, you know, we in our society we got to a point where we are very pushed to make, to create, to do. Using this time also to slow down and just breathing is so important. Otherwise you can burn out. So it's a forced slowdown. Use it in that way, own it in that way. I think it can be very beneficial for people.
Read a novel. You don't have to read anything about writing or directing. Just go and read a nice novel that you get into and get lost in, and actually it's going to do more for your directing and writing than reading Robert McKee's storybook from back to front.
Yeah, that's what I don't do enough. I read much more of those Robert McKee books, novels.
Yeah.
Athena, finish this phrase for me. Life as a writer-director is
a journey. And a journey where, you know, with twists and turns.
Thank you very much for this chat. It's been a pleasure. It's been enlightening.
Thank you. Listen, have a lovely weekend.
You too.